Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a very special episode of the Built on Purpose podcast, where each episode I interview exceptional leaders, entrepreneurs, authors, philosophers, and straight up interesting people to explore their outlook on life, work, and leadership. My hope for our listeners is that you can take away a special nugget of information from each of these interviews, something that will serve you and the people most important to you in pursuing a life built on purpose. My name is Brian Moore, co-founder and managing partner of Y Scouts, and today I'm interviewing Ann Rhoades, the current founder and Pres, P-R-E-S, which stands for Person Responsible for Exceptional Service, at People Inc. She's the former Chief People Officer at Southwest Airlines and one of the co-founders of JetBlue. In this episode, Ann and I talk about the importance of values and why leaders need to create a values-based culture. We also discuss the power of the millennial generation, the rise of gender equality in leadership, and the rising growth of new management models like holacracy. I've known Ann for more than 15 years and feel blessed to have such an amazing leader in my life. I know you're going to enjoy her spirit, her wisdom, and her enthusiasm. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the one and only Ann Rhoades. Ann, I can't thank you enough for dedicating some time to spend with our listeners today. It's just such an honor to chat with you. And I want to kick things off. Values have obviously played just such a huge part of the leadership and the cultures that you've been a part of. And frankly, it's just completely embedded in your philosophy. When did you know, beyond a shadow of a doubt throughout your career, at what point in your career did you know that values are the most important foundation to lay for any business, regardless of its size, of its industry?
You know, I think the first time that it hit me that it was value was probably when I was with Southwest, because they're so strong. Southwest Airlines are so strong on values. And I had worked for some good companies prior to that time, but I had not noticed that they particularly were values driven. They had values, but were not particularly living those values. But at Southwest, where I saw that people actually lived the values they espoused, it became clear to me that that was very, very important to their success. And I believe today that it really ensures your performance if you have great values, of course, and if you live them. It's not just putting them on the wall.
So, the difference between just having a poster on the wall and decorating the office with these words that end up meaning nothing, and those organizations that truly espouse the values, live them day in, day out. What's the difference? Like, why is it some companies haven't figured out that you can't just hang it up on the wall? You have to live it. What's the difference? What's the trick for leaders out there that are trying to cross that chasm?
I always tell people it's not a one-time event. There are leaders who believe, well, these are my values, therefore everyone will follow these values or they won't be part of the company. First of all, most of the time when they throw them on the wall, they haven't made sure that other people were part of that process throughout the organization, which helps validate it, in my opinion. So many times it's thrown on the wall because it's simply words they think they should have on the wall, not things that are really part of the behavior of the organization. So I really believe that people believe, for a customer perspective, internal and external, that if you put words on the wall, that people will believe it. What people believe is how they see you act. They don't believe the words on the wall. In this country, we've become pretty distrusting of many of our leaders. And so we now watch how they behave in lieu of just listening to them. It's not what they say. It's not what they put in the wall. It's how they live, and we watch their behaviors. And the great organizations put words on the wall that really recognize the behaviors of the organization, and that's what's so critical.
And so, one of the things that you just mentioned is the participation and involving more than perhaps just one individual or the senior leadership team in values creation. Is there What advice or what insight can you share around the appropriate time during an organization's inception, its history, its growth, and perhaps size? Like, how many people should participate in a values creation project?
So it's interesting. In very small companies that are startups where you have 2 to 5 people, or at JetBlue, for instance, when we had 9 people, we actually created the values and the behaviors at that point in time. So we were lucky because we got to define those at our really the inception of the organization. However, we have worked with many companies that are, some are 75 years old, like Loma Linda Hospital, and they wanted to really re-energize and revisit the values that they had for many years. There are also organizations that are small to mid-size who say, while we think we have values, we need to sit in the room with people throughout the organization. 20 to 30 people is typically the number that we suggest for large organizations. And those people should represent all areas of the organization. They should be female, male. They should be various age groups. They should have different tenure with the organization and be in different positions. But it should include the entire management team because obviously it has to start with them. But 20 to 30 is an appropriate number, assuming that you're a small to mid-sized organization. And also, if you're an organization that's come together from perhaps it's a merger, it's the result of mergers, and you've had 2 or 3 different companies. Someone I talked to yesterday had a recent merger, and while one of the companies had values, the other one they didn't believe was so strong in terms of having values. So they wanted to bring it together. And at that point, I would tell you should have people from both organizations also. Juniper Networks brought in people from all, they had purchased 17 organizations and tried to put them together. And they brought in people from all of those organizations to represent that organization. The answer is you can do it at any time in your history. If you're lucky enough to do it when you start, it's probably easier. But if you're not, there's no reason not to do it at any point in your history and at any size, frankly. 2 people to thousands of people. Juniper Networks had thousands of people around the globe, and they were able to do it and do it very effectively. It just takes a little longer.
So I want to go back to just for a moment your comment about Southwest Airlines, and that was really the first place that you experienced values being lived day in, day out, guiding the behaviors of the organization. You obviously spent some considerable time with likely one of the best leaders the business world has ever known and seen in Herb Kelleher. To have that kind of access to his brilliance and work with him is a gift. And I'd love for you to share with us, perhaps some of the most important leadership lessons that you've picked up from Herb, and also, if you can share, maybe some of a funny story or two that just is one of those Herbisms.
There are many of those, I will tell you.
Sure.
One of the reasons fun is a value for Southwest is because it started with Herb, and he was tons of fun, and he lived that and used his sense of humor every day in addressing even the most difficult situations. It's very interesting. I do believe he's probably one of the best leaders we've ever seen, but it's because it was intuitive to him. And living with high integrity and living in a very difficult world, I would tell you, it is not easy to operate airlines. And particularly at the time Southwest started, when the legacy carriers were so well known and Southwest was just a startup, it was very difficult to compete. But he did it in a way that I think today is probably people try to emulate across the world in terms of the way he did it. And how he did it was he defined the values that would lead that organization. And fun is a value with him, and he lived and breathed, though, the warrior spirit. He believed in the golden rule, and it was as simple as that. He never treated people in a way that he didn't want to be treated. And even when it was a case of you're not performing at a level where you could stay at Southwest, he took care of you on the way out like he took care of you on the way in. It was amazing how he cared about people. And he would go over, for instance, on the holidays, on Thanksgiving, and shoulder tap someone who was a baggage loader over in the airport, and take his or her place for the day and let them go home with their family.
Wow.
He would do simple things. Yeah, it was just incredible. He would serve meals on holidays to the employees at the various sites. He would travel to the sites on a frequent basis. If he was on a plane, he's the one that always gave out the peanuts and talked to customers. He didn't like homogenized information. On weekends, he would take home the toughest letters that were sitting up in the customer service area and answer them himself. And in fact, one of them is a great story. He had a a woman who said that she did not like Southwest colors of the plane. She didn't like the orange. She thought the red was ugly. She thought the whole plane was ugly, the colors. And she also didn't like the fact that we had friendly flight attendants. She didn't like the call brands of the liquor. She didn't like anything about Southwest. She didn't like the fact that they didn't have assigned seats. So he said that he worked all weekend on trying to respond to her and came up with another 5 pages of why we did what we did. There was a reason for it. And he said, I finally decided that there was only one answer for her. And so I wrote her back, Dear Mrs. Smith, we will miss you, love, Herb. Oh, she became a pen pal, by the way.
Oh,
she ended up loving him and flying us.
That's great. That it's funny. That reminds me of just a real quick story. I had the good fortune of seeing the co-founder or founder of Costco, Jim Senegal, I believe is his name, speak. I hope I didn't mess that up. And there was a bit of an uproar amongst some of the employees, which came from customer feedback about the lack of a express lane or, a lane if you're going into Costco and you just need 2 or 3 items. Well, how can we get these customers through our lanes quicker? And Jim said to the employees at an all hands on deck meeting, something quite similar to your Herb story in that, what our express lane is? Our express lane is when we see a customer who's got one of those giant pallet-based carts and they've got what appears to be $800 to $1,000 worth of merchandise, you open up an express lane for them because that's who we are and that's who we're here to serve. We are not the express lane type organization. And so staying true to who you are, as Herb obviously did in that letter back to Mrs. Smith about missing her, is the courage that oftentimes is missing in leadership today.
I totally agree with you. And I think over and over, another thing that he did, and a little known fact was Southwest used to have a list of people long before we started having lists of people who can't fly for other reasons. We had a list of people who couldn't fly because they treated our employees poorly.
Wow.
And no other airline had that, to my knowledge, at the time.
Wow.
Yeah. I thought it was, and again, it was something that he decided to do. And I even saw him at a gate. He was with me at one time. We were on a trip in California, and someone was treating one of our customer service agents very poorly. And he actually pulled him on a line, told him he would personally buy him a ticket on another competitive airline, but he would not be flying our airline if he treated our people that way.
Wow, that's awesome.
He lived the values.
Yep.
He lived the golden rule, and he showed employees what it means when a leader exemplifies the values that they put on the wall.
Well, and the message that sends, right? Yeah, I mean, you that employee who was dealing with this less than happy customer at the airport, to see Herb do that spreads like wildfire throughout the organization, that the leader of the company is willing to stand up for what's right and live the values, even when it means potentially sacrificing revenue.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I mean, it was, and it was so, again, intuitive to him. And I think for leaders that the values, if you're going to put them on the wall, they better be those values that you can live by and really are intuitive. And they become part of the DNA and probably are part of the DNA before you even put them on the wall of great leaders. So integrity, you have to come with integrity. If you put it on the wall, hopefully you have it long before you put it in the wall.
Sure.
But I really think that that's a great leader.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So you said, the airline business by no means is an easy business, probably one of the most difficult. Yet after your Southwest experience, you decided to help start a new airline in JetBlue, and were one of the co-founders of JetBlue. What was that? What was the driving force for you and your fellow colleagues to start what is one of the most difficult businesses to start? What was behind it?
It's so much fun. Actually, I always think there will be a better model for anything. So any time that you get to be part of a great organization, you know that great is a moving target. So great is defined as the latest experience someone had, and it was a great experience, right? But tomorrow it might be different. So I thought it would be wonderful. And Herb said, why are you, I saw him at the airport at Love Field once afterwards, and he said, why'd you do that? And I said, because I wanted to do one better and do it in a very tough environment in New York, where I used to say that New Yorkers didn't love anything. Now they love JetBlue. But I used to think they didn't love anything. So it was actually the challenge of it. And the result was that 17,000 people today are absolutely part of the organization, and they all live and breathe the values. It's a great, interesting, even though we've had some, in fact, today the news was about a JetBlue employee, but you always have some negatives, but it's how you recover, I think, also that counts. But we recover using the values like we live using the values. So I hear that one of our flight attendants today had a problem.
I hadn't seen the news yet. Well, I would.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that JetBlue will handle it like they have with any bit of adversity, with
Right.
nothing but transparency and class.
We do, and that's what we do. We literally live the values, whether we are handling a tough problem or just an everyday issue. And those 5 values we have are critically important to us. And when we sat in a room and defined those 17 years ago, we said, what do we want people to say about us, and what do we want to do in terms of hiring people? So we also hire people with those values. And it's really important that when you have a values-based organization, you don't just put the words on the wall and think that becomes a culture. You have to work at it 24/7, and you have to work at it on a continuing basis. Whether you're a year old, 6 months old, or whether you're 25 years old, you have to continue working at it if you think it's going to stay alive and well. And it does have to become part of the DNA.
So I want to get back to JetBlue just for a second, and to the inception of JetBlue, and wanting to do what the version of great was going to be 17 years ago when it started. Was there a rallying cry or a true north or some crystallized statement that guided what JetBlue was going to be all about? Or was it just this general idea that, hey, we can do what other airlines before us have done and simply make it what today's version of great looks like?
We started with the purpose, and the purpose was to bring humanity back to air travel, because at the time we had all been disappointed in some of the legacy models that were literally really all of a sudden acted like they didn't want you there as a customer. You know, you get in a flight and no one greets you, no one says thank you for flying, no one, if you wanted a blanket, heaven forbid, or if you wanted a second Coke, they were going to either make you pay for it or go work for it. But it really was incredible, because all of us had had very bad experiences flying, and we flew a lot. I flew a lot. And, you know, I think that we wanted to create something that was totally different. And so we used the purpose, which I think was brilliant of us at the time. Though at the time we said, let's just keep it simple. And we didn't particularly call it our purpose, but it became our purpose. And that was to bring humanity back to air travel. So we weren't going to charge for every little thing. And we weren't going to make certain that, we were going to ensure that you had blankets and that you had whatever you needed. For instance, our TVs are free. We didn't want to have our flight attendants have to charge you if you wanted to have a TV, if you wanted to have a program. Or Wi-Fi, basic Wi-Fi is free. If you want enhanced Wi-Fi or faster Wi-Fi, then you can pay for it. But most people fly with the basic Wi-Fi. But I really think that bringing humanity back to air travel as a purpose was part of our success, because then we used that to test everything against. Every time we made a decision, we said, well, does this fit our purpose? And is this right for our model and our brand? It creates a really easy way to live in terms of the organization. To me, purpose is really so simple. It should be said very in 1 or 2 sentences, and it becomes so easy then to measure everything against. And it becomes to me, the ruler of whether we're going to do something and how we're going to do it.
So you shared with me an example probably a year or so ago during the Great Recession time frame, as every airline was having to figure out how to cut costs, how to survive some incredibly difficult business conditions, especially with the the rising cost of fuel and oil, and having this very crystal clear purpose statement of bringing humanity back to air travel, you shared with me a story about some cost savings, some initiatives, some ideas, some suggestions that had floated around the management table as you were thinking about how to make the decisions you as a team had to make. Do you recall the story you shared with me that I'm referring to without giving it away about decision or a decision that you guys made to really uphold your purpose statement during that time?
Well, and there were a number of them. Was it the one on Wi-Fi, or was it the one about every airline was letting people go? So that's an easy way to get your numbers, right?
Yeah, it was the one
But JetBlue
actually.
and Southwest.
Yeah, it was the one about some of the amenities for the passengers, specifically regarding blankets.
Right. Every airline, of course, doesn't. Usually, when you get on, they tell you you're out of blankets. They say
Right.
we've given them away, but it's only the second passenger, right?
Right.
Always. And so we said we're not going to do that. When people need blankets, we need to have them available. If they want a real heavy blanket, they can buy it. I mean, we can do things that maybe aren't basic, and they can pay for those. But basic amenities, if you want more. And the other thing was everybody was doing away with snacks. And instead, we offer a variety of snacks, and you can have as many as you want, literally. And you can have your choice of 5 or 6 of those. You can have as many drinks as you want that are the soft drinks or coffee or tea, and you can have as many of those as you want. You can have free Wi-Fi. All these decisions were part of it. And it just seemed like it all got back to the purpose of bringing humanity back to air travel, which was so easy when you looked at the decisions. Like Wi-Fi, our CFO actually told us that it was a 6-figure decision, and if we were going to charge for Wi-Fi or not. And we said, but remember our purpose, bring humanity back to air travel. And should we make our flight attendants have to go up and down the aisle and do it, or should we just allow people to have that as part of their original price? And of course, the answer was it will be part. It is something that we are going to give everyone. It's part of the basic package, which is, again, bringing humanity back to air travel. In our opinion, not nitpicking everybody and charging them for every single thing that they use.
I love
And
it.
in fact, it's one of the selling points for JetBlue.
I love it. I love it. You know, there's an argument in business that I've heard, I'm sure you've heard it as well, that goes something like, you know, we can focus on building a great culture and support that great culture with great values, you know, once we're profitable and when we have the time and the money to focus on that. Why is that the wrong argument?
Well, to me, you either live the values every day and you don't use the excuse that when we have the time and the money. We have had a profit sharing model similar to Southwest since we started at JetBlue. And I don't believe we've ever had a quarter where employees did not get profit sharing. If you always use the excuse that when we have it, instead of saying, how can we figure out how to do this, you have a different operating philosophy. And I think if you're going to have a purpose, that needs to apply to your people and figuring out a way to deliver on what's important to them every day. That's how they will deliver on your promise, and that's how they will keep your purpose alive and well. If you keep saying, well, tomorrow, no one's going to believe you.
Yeah.
What they're going to believe is that if they serve on a committee to help you get to yes for an employee instead of getting to no all the time, they will actually, even if you can't quite get where they want you to go, they will actually help sell that to your other employees if they participate in the decision. And we have people participating in decisions on almost every major decision that is made at JetBlue. We involve people, we involve teams, we involve people when we talk about where we're going, what the goals are. They know, they turn on their iPhone every morning and they see what the goals are. They see what yesterday's numbers were, what today's numbers are, the ones that they can affect.
Right. I've seen you speak a number of different times, and you are just an absolutely amazing. You're just an amazing speaker, and it's always wonderful to hear you share your experiences and the importance of values. And as you've been touring the country, sharing your values message with leaders, what's the biggest pushback or area of disbelief that you consistently hear about your message, if at all?
I think the pushback comes, it's interesting. Most of the CEOs want to do it. Now, they want to know how you do it. And I think you have to have a systematic way of building a values-based culture. Again, I think that having a system helps sell to CEOs. So the system, instead of just saying, well, we need a great culture, we need a values-based culture, their first question, and I just had this yesterday from 2 CEOs I spoke to last week in DC, how do I do it? And how you do it is you use a very simple system for doing it, but you have to make sure that it's a 360. So you have to have all parts of the system, and you need to take your time putting it in, make sure that it's right for you, make sure that it's customized to your organization. But it can be done in any organization as long as the leaders don't just do it and give voice to it, but don't give any effort or any really true. To me, they have to become the first examples of living those values and those culture and building that culture. Culture to me is a collection of behaviors of an organization. So they have to behave in a way that emulates those values. But the pushback I always get is, how do I do it?
And so,
or I've done it, but it isn't quite alive and well. And so then we give them some ideas on how to keep it alive and well.
Well, and I would have to assume that this is what this how do I do it question is inevitably what led to your book, Built on Values, which I believe was released back in the early part of 2011, if my mind is serving me well, creating an enviable culture that outperforms the competition. What writing a book is no small feat. What was that the catalyst of giving business leaders the blueprint, the how-to guide to do what you have done so successfully throughout your career?
It was. We finally put it into an operational model, and it has 5 parts, and the book is a prescriptive on how to do that. And we have heard from, as late as yesterday, I heard from a CEO who said that his wife put it into their company, and she credits their company, which is a startup in the tech world, with being successful because of the model. But the point was to make it systematic and to make it prescriptive, and that's what the book does. It's a prescriptive for doing it. If you literally take it chapter by chapter, you can do it, and you will see that it's a system for building a strong values-based culture, which I really believe in. And I think that's the thing that sells most CEOs. If they know there's a systematic, measurable way to do it, and also that culture is not soft and unmeasurable, which people have thought for years. But, if you notice the ads today on TV, I was listening last night waiting for the news, and it was very interesting. 2 or 3 of the ads talked about being values-based organizations. One was a car salesman. He was talking about the values of his car dealership. One was, it was some other product. It was a product in the healthcare world, and they were talking about this is a very values-based pharmaceutical company. And it's very interesting. All of a sudden, values are getting to be the sort of key word for messaging, because I think that a lot of young people, for all we kid about millennials, whom I love, I think that they care about values, and they care about working for an organization that mirrors their values.
Yeah, a lot has been made about the millennial generation and the generation following them, Gen Z, as I've heard they're often referred to. And I think, in my opinion, and I have a feeling you're going to agree, that, they've taken a bit of an unfair beating, that they're entitled and they're lazy and they don't want to work hard, this, that, and the other. And frankly, it appears to me that the younger folks that I've run into and have had the pleasure of being surrounded by are just the opposite. It's just the difference for them is that they recognize their time here is short. And if they're going to spend it working on something, it's going to be on something that matters and with people who share a similar belief system as them. Are you seeing the same thing?
I love it. Yes. And what I love about them is, A, they came here to make a difference. And if they can make a difference and you let them participate, they're going to stay. And if they cannot make a difference and you don't let them participate, but you dictate, if this is a control and command environment, they are not going to stay.
Yeah.
And the great environments like Google get it. They give them a project, they let them participate, they let them work in teams. And guess what? the results are great. And not only that, I mean, I was at Google early, like 7 in the morning. It was packed. They were all there. They had taken the early buses that Google supplies them from San Francisco. They were all there. And I mean, they were sitting in work groups, and I would be willing to bet you they're there late. So it's not a question of not wanting to work. It's a question of give them something that's valuable to do, and then let them participate and leave them alone. Because these are bright, aggressive, enthusiastic players. If you've hired right, I'm assuming you hire right, and then what you do is you let them run with it. There's just, honestly, they are fabulous.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And
I love them.
Yeah, I think it feels like for the first time in a long time, we've got a pretty sizable generation that is going to eventually become the majority of our workforce, if they're not already. I know there's some competing studies out there. As soon as this generation is in the leadership ranks and dominating the leadership ranks, I think it can't come soon enough, because my optimism for what they will do and the values they're driven by and the difference in the world that they want to make is awe-inspiring. And I think we need it. We need it quickly.
I do too. And I think that they're smart enough to see what the values are of an organization very quickly. And they either mirror those values themselves and believe in them, or they exit and go find a company that does live those values.
Yep, absolutely. Let's talk about HR for just a moment. Obviously, you've spent the lion's share of your career in this field of people, and as otherwise known as human resources, which you and I obviously are not fans of that terminology. But that aside, the world of talent, the world of human resources, the world of people has been under a bit of scrutiny and frankly, attack. I mean, it donned the cover of the Harvard Business Review last summer that it's time to blow HR up and build something different. I'm curious, why do you think that the HR profession is being looked at so closely today?
They care about getting to know rather than yes. So in most organizations, operators need you to get to yes. Whatever the issue, they need you to help them figure a solution. And instead of helping figure a solution, many times we tell them what the rules are. And so there's a book, First Break All the Rules, and trust me, Marcus Buckingham wrote it, and it's true. You have to not be rule bound. It doesn't mean that you break any rule that is a federal rule or a safety rule or something that is negative in terms of operations. It means that you quit building these houses around you in HR where people don't want to come talk to you about their issues because you won't ever help them find a solution. And the minute they sit down, you should sit and talk to them and look them in the eyes and tell them that you are going to help them find a solution. Operators need solutions. That's why I am such a fanatic over putting operators in HR and not people with 20 initials behind their names, but people who have never been an operator. People who can't get to yes, who always get to no. It is not about initials or how many you can accumulate or a PhD in front of your name. It is about, or behind your name, I guess I should say, a DR in front of your name. It is about how you help people make the organization run and how you get them the players on the bus who will make it successful. That is your biggest job. Your biggest job is getting to yes, not getting to no, and learning one more rule that stands in the way of them being successful.
So if you were the chief talent or chief people officer for an organization today, and you were looking to bring on some additional team members, what's the best advice you could give for how to find these rule benders and rule breakers who are going to move the business forward and find out how to get to yes?
Well, I'll tell you, operators get to yes. So one of the things that I thought was important at JetBlue was to have, for instance, when our team, we took a 4-year contract to build JetBlue, and then since that period, I had been on the board until just recently for 14 years. And one of the things that I kept pushing was to get an operator as a head of employment, somebody who knows what it looks like to be an A player in the field. So we ended up putting a captain, and I think we're the only airline I know of, a captain as a head of talent management. And she is terrific. And I will tell you that I think it matters that when you're going to look at the people to put in the job, you ask them to give you examples. If you're going to hire someone in HR, there's one question you have to ask them. Give me an example of a time you broke a rule for an employee. And when they give you one, ask them for another one. If they tell you they never broke a rule for an employee, you better make sure you share them with the competition. I'm telling you.
I love that. That's great. That's great. That's great advice. So I want to get to another topic, and I want to talk about the topic briefly of gender equality. And I'm curious, throughout your career and in the most senior of leadership roles, have you had to deal with a bunch of crap being a woman as opposed to being a man?
I think I started banking after grad school. And of course, banking at that time, I mean, we're talking 30 some years ago, banking at that time was definitely very male dominated. Luckily, I worked for an organization that had a number of senior women, which was very unusual. And we were very close. We worked together, which is not always true. Sometimes women don't tend to support women, but there's some of my best friends are people I've worked with, and a female boss I had in banking that helped me achieve great. Actually, she pushed me to the point to where I became one of the youngest officers in the organization. But I always built really good mentors from both the male and female leaders of the organization. Yeah. And I learned a lot, and I never felt like I wasn't equal in pay, but I didn't care about it. I cared about making sure I was doing the job, and that frankly, my ability to grow was equal to any of the males or others. And it's interesting, maybe I picked great organizations. Southwest had a large majority of female officers versus male, which was unusual for the airline business. I did not feel it there. JetBlue, we had great number, and still do, of strong female leaders. So I have been very blessed, and at Doubletree too, when I helped build Doubletree Hotels, it was very interesting that I've been blessed to work in great organizations where I did not feel that there was gender inequality, but that's because I was pretty pushy probably too. I mean, I didn't sit back, and they knew that I would be complaining about it if it happened, and especially because in my role as the people leader, I was able to see that we promoted women. In fact, in banking, we had some of the first senior VPs in Texas that were females in the Texas banking world. And we had two of them, and it was just terrific. And we were always being written up for that. But we had great, talented people who performed. And I think because I was lucky enough to work in some great values-based organizations, that was just not part of the equation. They treated everybody pretty equal. If it happened, and if I saw it, of course, I brought it up because I was in the people side. And so being the head of people for all those organizations, it was one of those things that if I ever noticed it in a certain department, and that did happen on occasion, if I noticed it, then I would say something about it, and we pretty quickly fixed it and found some people that could fill the roles. But you have to have someone inside that's sort of the watchdog on it, and typically it would be a female. But I had some great leaders, some CEOs that always would ask me, do you think we're developing our women as well as we can? At Southwest, one of the things we did, which is kind of interesting, we had a lot of events. Many were golf games where the men would go, and they were charity events, so they would go. And so I kind of got upset that we didn't know how to play golf as well, even though I had taken it in college and all my whole family played it. So I hired an instructor to come for all the female officers, and we learned how to golf. And so all of a sudden we were on the golf tournament. So it was pretty cool. It sounds like a simple thing, but you got to make sure that we participate at every level. And part of that is when they go play golf, we need to play golf. It's interesting. I love it now today. But also, one of the things that I watched was to make sure that our salary, we brought people in at the same level. And I think that is a responsibility of who's ever in the people side to make sure, because everyone doesn't know what the salaries are, but and make sure that is not showing up in any of the pay grades. And every time we were tested, every time we have a federal evaluation, we actually did very well. We didn't have problems with it in the organizations I was in. So I think we did a pretty good job of it. But somebody's got to be a watchdog. And I happen to work for CEOs who cared about it, and also people. I was watching it, and our people in the salary area always watch that. But it does occur.
Yeah.
And it's something that I certainly don't agree with. And people have really been talking about it now, and I'm glad. They ought to be making sure that it doesn't happen. Luckily, I was in an area where we made sure that didn't happen. And now I serve on boards, and believe me, I watch it.
Yeah, well, and the data, that's certainly, and it seems like it just continues to grow
I know.
more and more loudly. That, you look at the Fortune 500 and the percentage of females that are either at this senior executive table or those even in the boardroom is still it's in the teens percentage wise, and so we have a lot of room to grow. A lot of room to grow in that area.
We do. And one thing that you should watch, and when females are on boards, they need to make sure that they watch for that. And they may need to make sure that there is equality. I serve on a couple boards now, and I will tell you, one's healthcare. And I will say to you that we have as strong a women coming up behind the chancellor as we do, and as large a number, I believe, as the men. We also have who are docs and who could take over, very strong females. And we do the same thing in one of the public boards I serve on. We actually have a female we're looking at to be the next CEO potentially, as one of the potential candidates. So, I mean, when you serve on a board, I would say it's our responsibility to make sure that that is not happening in those areas where we can help affect change. So I am very cognizant of the fact that that is a responsibility I have as a board member. And I think every female and even males should make sure that we do see equality, because it is critically important, and obviously it is an issue.
Yeah, I think you and I could probably spend a whole nother podcast talking about boards and the composition of boards and how board members are being chosen, but we'll save that for a later time. I want to get to one last topic, and it's an interesting one. At least I hope it to be. And I know you're a huge fan of Tony Hsieh and what he and his team have built at Zappos, specifically around an unbelievable culture. I know you've had an opportunity to spend time there. This move that they've made to holacracy over the last couple of years has not been without its challenges. I'm curious, the early results are what they are. This is certainly not a short-term move. I read an article recently that this is simply one step in the process of Tony taking the organization to becoming what's referred to as a teal organization, which is essentially self-managed completely. What's your take on what Zappos is doing, the trail they're blazing, and what the future of management and what business looks like?
First of all, I believe that we all have to try to create organizations that in the future will be the ones that we all want to emulate. And to do that, it requires change. So trying holacracy was probably something that Tony wanted to try. He was obviously one of the first to try it. From the inception and from learning about it when I was actually there talking to the people, frankly, on the people side, they were very concerned. And why they were concerned, and I think the real problem with holacracy is anytime we make these changes, if we do it and test it a little bit and then see if we don't want to perhaps, and we do this a lot at JetBlue and in other organizations, and then see if we don't want to adjust it to fit, instead of doing away with all of the layers of management, with the exception of the top and a few in between, if we had done it in a way that got people engaged before we announce it, I believe that anytime we have change, get people engaged before, because your opportunity to be successful is much higher.
Sure.
When I talked to the younger people in that population before they implemented it, and I particularly talked to recruiters at Zappos, they said what's going to happen is all these young people, and there are some of them, we are not going to have any place to go in this organization. All of a sudden, all the levels we hope to achieve, and we have achieved over the years, because they had a huge promote from within policy, which I totally believe in. They said, and this is really funny because they said it before it happened, they said we're going to lose people because of it, and they did. And when I talked to the individual who's now the controller for Tony, who is the son of Sherry Roberts, who's our office manager. He said the same thing. He said people are still calling me for advice. I've moved over with Tony to the downtown project, but they're calling me with advice because they have no one to ask questions of. Young people want to be developed, want to have someone to show them the way, and want to learn and want to have a place to go. Mm-hmm. So Tony will find a way to do that, because I totally agree that he is one of the, to me, a great example of leadership.
Yep.
And I totally believe he will find a way to adjust this, whether it's teal or whether it's a third evolution of this. But I'm glad, that he's trying new and making an effort to really think differently, because the old school organization does not work any longer. And to me, we should all be thinking differently. How we do it is critical, that we involve people from the outset that are going to be part of the change.
Yep.
And I think young people are more open to change than others, but I think listening to them before we decide probably would help us do it and roll it out in a way that might be more effective. I'm just guessing at this, but having been there just before and then after, it's very interesting. I do have an opinion, and that is that it's not necessarily bad. I don't believe we need all these layers at all of leaders, but I do believe we need a place for people to go.
Yep.
And I do believe that how we do it is critically important.
Well, and thank goodness for Tony and his vision and courage to really push the envelope and to be on the forefront of this change. And it'll teach other organizations around the world of how to do this in the most successful way. And Tony should be commended, as well as the entire team there for doing what they're doing. That's great. That's great.
I love it. And I bet they'll come up with an even better model, and probably even then again another one.
Yep. Absolutely.
I love them. And I love that they're trying things, and I love that they're learning from them. See, it's not that all change ends up being successful. It's what we learn from it and go on to another model that makes us more successful, in my opinion.
Yep. I love it. So your book, for those who are listening that want to dig in, begin the process of creating a values-based culture, what's the best way? Is Amazon the best way? Is there a shortcut somehow for them to get access to the book, or is that the best way?
Amazon, if you want larger numbers, Amazon limits the number built on values, but there is a CEO reads. You can get large numbers from them, or we can help facilitate it through my office. They also have them at most of the Barnes and Nobles, but not all of them. Some have run out of them. This is a second printing, and they're thinking about another one. So we'll see. But they actually, you can easily get on Amazon. It's just that they only let you get 3 or 4. So we've had CEOs call us that want it for their whole teams, and we help facilitate that.
Gotcha.
And that's at our office at People Inc. in Albuquerque.
And so if CEOs and other leaders want to get in touch with you or members of your team, is that the best way to go about doing that? The peopleinc.com website?
Right.
Okay. And for those of you out there that want to take that next step, it's peopleinc.com, peopleinc.com. Well, Ann, this has just been fantastic. It's always such a pleasure to chat with you. You've been such a pioneer in the people and talent space throughout your entire career and in the leadership space. And giving this much of your time to us is just a gift, and I can't thank you enough. It's been awesome.
Anytime. I love what you all do. It's all about purpose.
I appreciate it, Ann. Thank you so much. We'll certainly be chatting with you sometime soon.
Okay.
All right.
Have
thanks.
a great week.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Until next time, thank you for listening, folks. You can obtain a transcribed version of this show and hear more interviews from the Built on Purpose podcast on our website, yscouts.com/podcast. There were quite a few questions I didn't have the opportunity to address during my time with Ann. I'm guessing you may have a burning question or two as well. Ann is gracious enough and has agreed to answer any further questions from our listeners. So please drop me a line at brian@yscouts.com with your questions, and I'll forward them on to Ann. If you enjoyed Ann's interview, there are several others I think you'll dig as well. Megan French Dunbar, co-founder of Conscious Company Magazine, Michelle Geelan, author of Broadcasting Happiness, and Mickey Agrawal, author of Do Cool Shit, are just a few of the many episodes you can find at yscouts.com/podcast. I promise more great interviews are on the way. Until next time, thanks again for listening.